Wow, rock and roll. Welcome to Road Poet Studio, the show that invites you, the viewer, to be on. If you sing, dance, juggle pianos, tap dance across the live wire, you're welcome to be on Road Poet Studio. Even if you got a pogo stick and you want to show us how you can go right along the peak of your roof without falling off, we want you on the show. And also, we're going to be looking for someone else to be on the show, a couple people maybe, so you can come here and read other people's poetry. It'll be like a little poetry editor thing, and you'll sit right there, the chair. Can we see the chair there? You'll be able to sit in that chair right there so that you can read poetry of other people's, and you can bring your own. We don't care, because that's what we do. This show is about you, the viewer, and your talent. Now tonight, I can't remember how to pronounce the word inclement weather out there, so our guest didn't show up, so we're going to just keep tap dancing anyways. You know, like our friend was going to be Roy Hector from Roy's Restoration of Automobiles down here on what I call Hot Rod Corner. That's right there on the corner of Elliott and Rantoul Street. Anything I love, man. I love being from Beverly. How many people out there from Beverly? This is a Beverly show, so there must be a bunch of yous. And I love being from Beverly. I love the history of Beverly. And that corner has an awful lot of history. I'm going to show a picture. This picture here, we'll get it in line. This picture here is in front of the old Davis drugstore that burnt down in 1984. We probably should have a moment of silence because I knew a lot of people there we lost. And I found this picture at the Historic Society in Beverly. That's why they call it the Beverly Historic Society, because it's in Beverly. And I found it there, and I bought the rights to it to use in this book here that I was putting together at the time, A Run to Hot Rod Corner. And this features Roy's Restoration, the legendary motors, the car show down at the Cummings Center, all the things in Beverly we love. All the things in Beverly we love. And I was trying to sell an ad, because I do that sometimes. And I went into Britain's Auto Parts, and I asked Wayne Britton, I says, do you buy like advertising? And he said, well, it depends what it is, and like how much, and I showed him the picture. I showed him that picture, and he said, wow, where did you get that? And I told him from the Beverly Historic Society. I bought the rights to it. And he says, I have that same picture upstairs in my office. So he took me up in his office at Britton's, and he has the 3.5-foot picture, the old panoramas they used to make, and that picture had 60-something motorcycles in it. They were all from Popes. They used to sell Popes at Britton's. His great-grandfather, it was Jones was the name. I believe it was Arthur Jones. And anyways, he bought an ad, but he also told me that his grandfather was in one of those sidecars that's got pitch gets real long. But anyways, so you never know what you're going to bump into when you're traveling around trying to go through history and you're doing art, and we want you on the show. And tonight we have Joe Sax, we have Jim Bass. I know you got other real names, but I like them because you guys earn them. How do you get names like that? You earn them. You pick up your instrument and you just play. Give me some music, brother. Wow, they're getting better, huh? You guys, come on, thank you very much. And if you people out there, send us an email. It's Laconia, small l, 1916 at yahoo.com. And you say, hey, we think Jim and Joe are great. Thanks for having them on the show. And, people ask me sometimes, how did you know that? And I'll tell you, because the newspaper, especially that North Shore Weekly, has the greatest section. It's like what's happening section. So if you read that, you can find out what's happening around. And every other town has that. I think there's another one, the Town Common down around Newburyport. And, you read things and stuff, and you find these things. A few years ago, I read this thing that was about the stock car reunion. There used to be stock cars. They used to be everywhere, stock cars around there, in the Pine Speedway in Groveland. But there also used to be another track in Peabody that people used to go to. And it was just, because they were more or less a mom and pop track. It was just like, you could get an old car, beater, and you could take it. You could go to the spectators race. Some young gentlemen would get their father's car and take it to the spectators race. That wasn't too good. Dad didn't like what happened in the morning. But I'm going to read a story about, I start out, because I do this a lot, here, and I go there, and then I end up there. Now, Saturday night at the races are memories of the Pines. Like most of my stories of my life or memories of my past, they never really start where they're set out to end, where they're heading. They always start off a stage and then move toward the center of the frame. My memories of the Pine Speedway in Groveland, Mass. From 1962 to 1962 move just that way. They really begin in the summer of 1961 in West Peabody Speedway. In the summer of 61, my Uncle Bob, or Mac as his friends called him, but I had 7 uncles. Each one was called Mac by their friends. So when you called Mac or Bob to the story, to keep it straight. My Uncle Bob was a rover by nature, but every once in a while he'd settle down, as he did, and he'd pose as an auto mechanic. It was during one of these posings that our story begins. He was working in a backyard shed garage in Beverly, Mass., a small wooden structure. I'm not really sure how many cars it held at once, but it seemed like the world was full of such structures and folks twisting a wrench trying to make a living then. The garage ended up with one of those 3 or 4 old cars out back, blunderbusses, wrecks we used to call them, from the 40s to be exact, rust and dents and perhaps a rod knocker too, but each one had a few miles left on the engine. So my Uncle Bob and his boss George came up with the idea they should paint the company's name on the side of one of these cars and race them at the West Peabody Speedway Spectators Race. So my uncle invited me along also to every West Peabody Saturday night race that summer. 2 or 3 of my friends and I would go pile into one of these old blunderbusses, and my uncle would toss the repair plate and we'd all head off to the track. These cars were really mobile jewels. A 42 Chevy sedan that probably weighed as much as an oil tanker, and half the windows would go up and the other half wouldn't go down. And there were always some windows that wouldn't go down except for the wing windows. They were totally missing. Then there was a 42 Ford 4-door sedan with the back armrest and the door handles tied across the back so to keep the doors closed from flying open on the turn when they were racing around the track. If you wanted to ride in the back seat of one of these cars, you had to either climb over the front seat and then roll over the rope, your own poison if you do, or you could climb in the back passenger window. But for a 13 or 14-year-old teen heading for the racetrack, this was luxury traveling. The car we raced most likely that summer was a 42 Plymouth Coupe. White, I believe, though it's hard to remember exactly between the dents, the rust, and the touch-ups with the paintbrush about a gazillion times paint job. And not all of these easy to find clearly just what color it originally rolled off the assembly line as. Now, you may be wondering why all these cars end up being 42s. I believe it was because in 1960 or 61s, cars were either before the war or after the war. The 20s and 30s cars were starting to be old, and therefore they were being saved. 46 and 48s were made after the war, so they were still saleable. But the 42s were pre-war and after 30s, manufactured in the days rather than forgotten and destined for crush's blow. The spectator race of the West Peabody Speedways were only 5 or 10 laps, but they always seemed like so exciting adventures. Mostly because my uncle was racing in them. We rode there and there's one of these old big cars, not to mention the fact the spectators' races were a lot like watching rush hour traffic gone Mad Max. Though the cars were brought with old races were wild, we never had any doubt we would ride home in the cars that we brought then in. We had total confidence in these old cars. We drove them there, we raced them there, and we would drive them back. There was never anything set up as a backup plan. Now, a clearer mind would have known that one of these mobile stacks or wrecks of steel wouldn't make the 20-mile ride in each way, was iffy on its own right without racing it around, plowing into other cars for 10 laps. But then to race them around a circle wide open, usually in second gear for 10 laps with about 30 or 40 other lunatics doing the same thing, each trying to plow into the side of your car for amusement, boosts the odds of riding back into one of these jewels that you brought to staggering odds. But we still never had any doubt that we were riding back in what we brought. The old Plymouth Flathead 6 was faithful, even if it didn't have a slight rap, but it was the dents that finally got it. In the end, I remember the last night we raced it riding home. The trunk lid had been sprung. One of the headlights was gone. The other one was looking at stars. The engine was rapping a little louder than it usually did, and we all knew this was the last race for this 42. We also knew come Monday morning, the old Plymouth would be hauled away to the White Plymouth heaven, and we would have to choose another blunderbuss to finish the summer race with. So whenever I think of the Pines, 1962 to 1966, my mind carries me back to West Peabody Speedway, the summer of 1961, with our noses pushed up against the chain link fence, watching my uncle in that old Ford roar around the track, Plymouth roar around the track, and I know in my heart and soul that race will never end. We're going to go to a break. We'll be right back after this. Rock and roll, we're back. Hey, Jim and Joe have been practicing a blues number and they want to play it right now. Thank you guys. You know, every once in a while you shoot a show and then you get halfway through it and you realize what it is, where it's really going to be. This is our Memorial Day show because, you know, being a writer and being a poet, you write, and, you know, the hardest thing it is for a writer is sometimes is to write obituaries for close people. And this, I wrote this and then it just keeps like changing the addendum on the end. The White Mountain Rose, making memories one cruise at a time. For Joe and Sheila to acquire a 1948 Plymouth four-door sedan is an excellent car to carry their dreams, their memories, and their grandchildren. Joe, Cousin Joey as they call him, and Sheila have been together and married for over 40 years. A lot of cars have gone on into and out of their lives. When asked what his first car was, Cousin Joey answers it wasn't really a car. It was a 47 GMC pickup, unless you count the 51 Studebaker I used to drive in my backyard when I was a kid. He points to his backyard where he still lives after all these years. He has deep New England ties and roots. The first car Sheila remembers was a 55 green Pontiac they dated in. Around 1965, when they had their first son, Chip, there was 3 months of Oldsmobiles there, and headed to stock car races. Joe, he ran a 59 Plymouth with a 318. They were 4 members of their team: Cousin Joey, Sheila, her brother, and his girlfriend. The car's number they chose was 96. They came up with that number by adding all their ages together. Cousin Joey has driven the 96 painted on the stock car for over 40 years, the old rock and roll in the millennium days. Over the years, Cousin Joey and Sheila have built and raced many stock cars, attended many races, and raised their share of stock car race fans, i.e. their children and grandchildren. They have spent their years building, driving, and dreaming of stock cars, hot rods, and motorcycles. Just when folks are thinking about it's time to sit down and take a rest, Cousin Joey and Sheila are off to the car shows and heading for the cruise nights. Since purchasing the 48 last fall, Cousin Joey and Sheila have spent many hours painting, fixing, and preparing and exciting for the cruise season ahead. So far this season have been to the parade at Laconia, attended cruise nights at Bobby Joe's Diner, and Plain Jane's when the season begins. A 318 sits tightly tucked under the 48's hood. What the show doesn't show is the dual master cylinder, the electric fan, and the hot cam that Joey installed. We are very sure that the story of Miss Rose, the White Mountain Rose, is far from over. Cousin and Joey have many more car shows and cruise nights on their road map ahead. There will be many more hours of wrenching and dreaming and getting ready for the day upstays up ahead when they haul their grandchildren around and Miss Mountain Rose, and perhaps one day great-grandchildren. This story, they lost their grandson about a year ago, little Joe. And so I printed in here. The story has been reprinted in love and memory of little Joe Nelson, the son of Gary and Tina Nelson, the grandson of Joe and Sheila LaQuire. You know, the story doesn't end there. Sheila passed away a little while ago of cancer. And we'd like to read this and have their memory, because the people who love cars, it's a whole community, and we're grateful for the people we have in our community. Some music, brothers. Now, I'm going to close out the show here, but remember, if you sing, dance, juggle pianos, tap dance across the live wire, we want you on. And we're also looking for somebody to come and just read some poetry now and then. You'd be like being an editor. You could be the Road Poet Studio TV show editor. That would be fun. And this is a story. Now, Colorado T. Sky used to be the poet laureate at Connecticut Bike Week, said he thinks this is like the definitive motorcycle history, story. Now, the name of it's If I Only Had a Nickel. Some riffs, brother? If I only had a nickel for every little town I ever rode through, trying to forget, trying to shake the blues. If I only had a nickel for every time I dialed the phone and didn't let it ring. If I only had a nickel for every Tony's Only pizza shop in every back road town where I've sat and stirred coffee with handlebar tired hands and rode with lonely eyes. If I only had a nickel for every old, fat-bellied, panting-tongued dog I've seen run across the dry yellow lawn in the twilight afternoon setting sun that reminded me some other old dog once back home. Yeah, if I only had a nickel for every self-man in Maple Street where I've sat, waiting for the light to change, not knowing when the light changed, was I gonna hook a left or right? Yeah, if I only had a nickel for every lonely girl's eyes I've ever stared into as I rolled my Harley to the light, her sitting on a porch step, dreaming of somebody coming and sweeping her up and taking her away, and as my bike idles and our eyes dance, but nobody's got the guts, the galls, or the gumption to make the connection, so the light turns, our fate rolls by. But I know there'll be another town, another time, another girl, another light, because if I only had a nickel for every girl's eye, every cop's eye, every punk's eye, every cursing driver's eye I ever stared into, if I only had a nickel for every cold mile spent in a lonely night in a damp tent under a rainy sky, if I only had a nickel, they'd be snapping in stars, falling stars, and snapping like dragons, singeing and nipping at my heart. Yeah, if I only had a nickel for every inch, every mile I've spent pounding out trying to shake these blues. Yeah, if I only had a nickel for every stranger's face that reminded me some of the stranger's face someplace else. If I only had a nickel for every little house that reminded me somehow someplace else. Yeah, if I only had a nickel, I'd have a pocket full of dimes, a fist full of dollars, and still no reason to stop. And now it's time for the close the show, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we want you to be on the show, so get a hold of us. Hey, rock and roll, thank you for watching the show, and we're hoping you're going to be on soon. And we'd like to thank the camera crew out there, because you guys are great, and watch the work they do. You know, Chris over there is always making me look good, man, and Matt's always showing up, and the camera lady. You know, we're lucky. Thank you, BevCam watchers.